What's good, guys? This is No Big Deal, and this is Creative Control, the podcast where we dive into God, music, and the intersection of creativity and faith. Today, on our 20th episode, we have back for the first time my pastor, my friend, my mentor, and author as well, Trevor Atwood. Welcome
Great
back.
to be here. Can you say back for the first time?
Back for the first time.
I guess I am back for the first time.
Yeah. It's an interesting phrase, but
it's a rerun, back for the first time. So
Yeah.
if I come back again, it will be back for the second
That's
time,
right.
even though it's my third time.
Yeah.
That's very confusing.
Yeah.
It's like, what does next Thursday mean? Is it the very next Thursday, or is it the Thursday of next week?
But this is Creative Control, so we can't just say for the second time. We have to,
okay, I love it.
We have to right off the bat, wait, first of all, you said you were coming back every 10 episodes and you had like a name for them.
DecaRev.
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 Oh, DecaRev is your name. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I want to be, DecaRev.
Yeah, so every 10 episodes
10, DecaRev.
you come back on the podcast. I think that's fire. Right off the bat, I want to give you an opportunity, another shot at explaining how dad jokes are like rap lyrics. I just want to know if you've done any thinking and have another example that can maybe drive the point home.
Okay, let's see. Now, I didn't prepare for this.
Yeah.
So you just catch me off the spot. I will tell you that this is my non-answer.
Yeah.
We're in the heavy politics season right now. We got election coming up. So everybody's used to non-answers. So I'll just give one right
That's
here.
True.
I am doing a lot of reading on comedy right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I am that's kind of being driven home about comedy is comedy helps people to understand that somebody thinks like me.
Yeah.
Somebody feels like me.
Right.
It's another expression of that. Comedy, more than changing people's minds, which we kind of thought that for a while. If we can just be satirical enough or make fun of something enough, people will be like, I don't want to be a part of that. But all it does is kind of it gathers people with you, I think, in a positive way. And comedy, especially when we're talking about puns or dad jokes, those are you're using your mind to bring wordplay together in a way that people identify with it. So maybe what I'll do this time is, instead of showing the similarities, I'll show maybe the slight difference. Okay. So I think specifically with dad jokes or puns, what you get is you get a punchline that's supposed to bring a laugh or a groan. All right, but still, people are coming together. Yeah, people are still coming together behind that. I feel something is true about that.
Yeah.
But I also that seems a little hokey.
Yeah.
And with rap, I think what people do when they hear a bar, is this what the kids say?
Yeah.
Or when they hello fellow kids, when they hear a bar, they hear a lyric, they hear something that's fire. They're pulling together behind both the wordplay and the truth. So I think both honor truth. Both are bringing people together behind an agreed upon kind of truth. It's just one is leading people to laugh or groan, and the other is leading people to go like that.
Yeah.
Just exactly like that.
That's actually interesting. I guess like you think about a stand-up comedian, like the win for them is like people laughing, obviously, like cracking up. But I've never thought about it until you just said it. I guess a dad joke, it's a win when people groan. Cause like it
kind of is. Yeah. It kind of is.
Like, especially if you're like you're aware you're telling, like there's like a lot of jokes that you tell like in your sermons, like you weave humor into your sermons. And sometimes you say something and you know how people are going to react.
Oh, I definitely know.
Like, you know they're going to be like, oh, man. Like,
but you remember it. See, that's another similarity is the lyrics, the really, really good wordplay in rap is what that's what sticks with people. It's what they remember. Yeah. And like it or not, it's the cheesy, hokey stuff that people walk away with remembering. It's not the even in sermons. It's like, it's not the well-explained stuff that sticks with people. They get it. They feel good in a moment because they're like, oh, that was kind of confusing, but now at least I know somebody knows this. But it's hard for them to repeat it. But man, stuff sticks in. You know, there'll be phrases that pops in that's like, that's cheesy, but guaranteed. Remember.
Yeah. It makes me think of this is so random, but when I was in college and we were studying audio production, and they made you study all of these things that are like on the technical side of audio engineering. So like you had to know about electricity and stuff like that. And we were just trying to be able to pass the test. Like we wanted to make beats and rap. But we had to know all this stuff. So it's like, okay, we're cramming. We're trying to remember, how can we remember all these terms and all this stuff? And we really would make up these wild, like for one of the questions was like, what is a measurement of voltage in something? And you had to know like what unit is a measurement of voltage. And so it was a dBu, like a dBu. And so we did dBu Pikachu.
Boom.
Because it's
that's right, because he's electric, baby.
This is electric. So like and I still remember that. Like,
well, actually, let me ask you a question. Am I allowed to do that?
Yeah.
Can I take over the podcast?
Yeah, you're DecaRev, so it's a little different.
So do you think in rap, is it more important for a lyric that sticks with people, they remember, or maybe a reaction you get? Maybe you could base it on reaction. You get better reaction from people when you have wordplay, like this word connects with this word, and I never associated those words together, but in this moment, or do you get it better with rhyme?
Ooh, better? Like which
what gets more? What are people going to comment on? What are people going to come back and say? I like the wordplay, or I like that rhyme was insane.
It's good. They're going to comment on the wordplay.
Yeah.
But the wordplay hits. They're going to comment on the wordplay, but the wordplay and the rhyme together is what makes the bar. In my opinion.
Yeah.
So like my first bar that really like people commented on, where they were like, oh, we need to like tap into this guy, like this is different, was on Treetops, and it was living water, he rained on me, raised by the sun, that's photosynthesis. But it had rhyme, it was screw it up, I need slow-mo emphasis, no more road managing, no more internships, living water, he rained on me, raised by the sun, that's photosynthesis.
Yes. No, okay. I have this problem all the time.
Yeah.
About all the time, I mean 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah.
All right. But there will be something in a song, a line in a song that I just think is like, the wordplay here is incredible. And then I'll kind of take it out of the song to share it with somebody.
Yeah.
And even though that wordplay is there, it took the rhyme away, just like in that one.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel as good. It doesn't hit as hard. It doesn't like.
And I think I've thought about it. I think the idea running in the background of people's heads is like, how did he do that within the boundary there?
Yes.
The rhyme creates a boundary.
Okay.
Because a lot of people could just say creative things with no boundary. They could just take their time to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
But the thing about rap is like, how did he convey that in that new way, in that creative way, and he kept the rhyme scheme. There's only so many words that he could end that line with.
Yeah.
Especially when you get into multisyllabic. So like that the fact that it was photosynthesis and it was no more internships, like they were like, that's what makes the bar. You know what I mean? Like,
okay, you know what I need to think about for next time, and I'm going to be prepared next time for this. I need to write this down. I want to figure out what is the rhyme of comedy.
Oh yeah.
Or even of speaking is like, what is that people don't realize that's that. You know, I don't know if it's like, what is it, the sizzle on the steak, but that people don't realize is happening in even, like preaching.
Yeah.
But preaching and stand-up comedy are similar, and there's even a smaller part in sort of joke telling. Maybe not puns, but in sort of longer form jokes. So I need to figure out what that is, and I could do this. I could eventually maybe write. If I'm the first one to make a connection on this, maybe there's a book out there already. Yeah, maybe I could write about this.
It's probably like the rhythm of comedy, because so we went to see my cousin at Zany's. He was also on the podcast, Xavier Phillips, and he had this joke that like it always kills, but he was a little bit thrown off by like the crowd was different that night. Like they had different sensibilities, and kind of like him leading up to this joke that always kills kind of wasn't going exactly right. The crowd wasn't laughing where he thought it was. They thought it was really funny. His mom was there, and like that wasn't a planned thing, so he started doing crowd work based on that, which is different than what he was doing. And then he gets to this joke, and I've seen it so many times, and it always kills. He messed up the character in the story. It's his grandpa that is the character, but he said his dad, right? And then, but it doesn't make sense with his dad.
Yeah,
he's over. He's talking about his conservative grandfather. He's biracial. He's talking about his conservative super conservative grandfather. His dad is my uncle, just a black man.
Okay.
Says dad, and he's like, "Oh, not dad, my grandfather." And that little,
that the whole thing's off.
That little, like, I mean, people were still like engaged. It was like everybody's like, "Oh, that's not a big deal," but like for him, the lead up to it was off.
Yeah.
And then like when the punchline happened, it was like normal, but it was like that's not what's supposed to happen.
It brings people, that moment right there brings people out of a storytelling world and brings people into a world of facts. Yeah. And so now you're working on clarifying the facts, and you've gotten people out of, because you have to transport people to a different world when you're telling a story, which is, I mean, that's true about comedy, that's true about preaching, that's true about music. It's like you're taking people to a different world. And it's kind of like in the if you're performing live in the middle of a song, if you stop and you're like, "Hang on, guys, I mispronounced that last word." I mean, that's gonna be a kind of break that takes people out of true. Like the boundaries that you've given them inside of a concert or inside of a preaching event or inside of a stand-up show. You have to keep people in there, and as soon as you break that, it's like, facts exist in the world, and
that's actually interesting. That's like something that like I've learned as a live performer, like in a concert. It's like you kind of don't want to break that I don't even know what to call it, what you just described, but you want to keep it in narrative form, like if you stumble over a lyric, either you say the wrong word or you forget the word, like the way to keep people in it is just not referencing it,
right?
And just the confidence of it. And it's like the longer I do it, the more I realize like, oh, some of these like all-time great performers that I've seen that I thought they put the mic down because we're just supposed to know the lyric and we're gonna sing,
right?
We're gonna and it's like that's true, and they have that luxury, but they definitely forgot what they were going to say right there.
Right. Yeah.
I know that now because I've done it. I've like, I don't know what's coming up, and you don't let them know that. Yeah. You just like, and everybody feels like, oh, we're supposed to know this part. And if they don't know it, they're like, oh, I just, I'm not as big a fan as these people over here who know it, you know what I mean? Type thing. And it's like similar. I also think another similarity between all three is like specific word choice. Yeah. I saw like another comedian, Nikki Glasser. I think she was on the like Conan O'Brien podcast, and she was talking about how they'll workshop like a joke and try to pick like the exact right word. And
I mean, basic level, especially like short form joke telling 101 is you can never include anything from the punchline. Cannot be in the setup. You like once you do that, you kill it. And I see people make that mistake all the time. I'm always walking around judging people's comedy. That's what I do. I'm judging people's prayers. I'm judging people's comedy. Yeah. But if you include anything from the punchline in the actual joke, it's like giving the definition of a word by using the word. You can't do that. It messes the whole thing up. That it's really weird because you think the way the mind takes that in, because you think, well, it's just it's a setup for a joke, and that's the joke, right? I still have the heart of it, but man, just one word can completely take someone out of the moment where they can receive anything or hear anything.
Yeah. It actually is a craft, on all accounts. With something like when I kind of first started coming and listening to your sermons at City, I know the humor like stood out to me because I didn't grow up with that in sermons. Like there was no, I know a lot of people grow up with that, but I just didn't. My pastors, there was no jokes. And so in my mind at the time, I was like, I grew up where pastors don't tell jokes. So I'm thinking this must be a very calculated tactic. Like you must be doing this to check if people are falling asleep, or I
can see that,
you know what I mean, like stuff like that. So is there like some type of like method behind it, or is it just your personality, or
I think it starts as my personality, which I actually take from the scriptures. One of the incredible things about what God does with the Bible is he has all these, he's making one big story. And he's taking all of these authors that are from, they range thousands of years in time that they lived, from Old Testament to New Testament. But he's taking all of these authors, different ethnicities, growing up in different cultures with different people. And they're all telling one story, but none of them are telling it in the same way. They all are true to their personalities. So God doesn't come in and alter their personality to like a vanilla God personality and then reveal himself through them.
That's right.
He does it through people. This is sometimes in theological circles, this is sometimes referred to as the scandal of the particular. In that God comes into, and we obviously see this in Jesus. God revealed himself and walked among us through one particular person who was one particular ethnicity, who had a set of one particular parents, who lived at one particular time. And especially in the Platonic sort of thinking that we have, which is there's a big, like we think of truths as general and abstract. And God comes in as like, this guy right here, Jesus, he is the truth. And he's particular. And that doesn't feel right to us because it feels like once you get in particulars, you're kind of watering down the truth. And like there's a general truth, like love is a general thing. And it's an idea, it's a concept. And once it becomes particular, we taint it. But the scandal of the particular is like, it's in through the scripture too. It's like God takes all of these individual people. And you would think, oh, there's no way that God can reveal himself through all of these people in their personalities, sitting down, thinking with their brains, sinful, marred by sin, like 100%, and writing this stuff down. Like under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. But the inspiration of the Holy Spirit doesn't mean, God came into them and they just started going like that.
It's not automatic, right?
Yeah, it's not a possession. So that is a part of why I am comfortable being myself. I'm trying not to get too cliche, but being myself when I preach. And humor is a big part of my life.
Right.
It has always been a big part of my life. I'm a third child, so it's like humor is survival as a third child. And a lot of my life, humor was what I stepped into. It was what I contributed, part of what I contributed into a community. And so that's the way I want to be when I preach. And I think, your experience of growing up kind of understanding pastors and therefore, so you got the leaders of your church like completely removing themselves, at least in a preaching event, from humor. It's like there's something being implicitly taught and absorbed there that says, because I'm sure when you interact, like there maybe or maybe not.
No.
I'm sure
right.
there's like humor there, like there's a person there.
A lot. Like,
yeah, when you interact. Yeah. And so why does this go away? Now we do this in our prayers too. And it's there's this idea that the sacred and the holy is completely devoid of humor.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And so I actually in my prayers, both, I think this is true. If it's just me and God, but especially when I'm in a group of people, and this gets misunderstood some, and probably sometimes I misunderstand myself in it, but I'm working jokes into prayers because the way I'm thinking is like, man, Jesus is personal. Jesus is with us. And what I don't want to do, if I was Jesus, and every time somebody talked to me, they became ridiculously serious. They removed all the humor out of their voice. I mean, I would not want to be talked to like we talk to Jesus sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I love working humor as it comes to mind into sermons and as it comes to mind even into corporate prayers. Can that be a liability for me sometimes? Absolutely. Does my wife have to sit down with me sometimes after group settings and say, I think you took that a little far?
Yeah.
I can't confirm nor deny.
Yeah.
But it is, I do think it's an important part of being human.
Yeah.
And not being human in a negative sense, being human in the fullness of the image of God.
Yeah.
That we have humor, it's there, and it can do something beautiful and positive.
Yeah. And that, like what you were saying about like pastors growing up, it's like, yeah, like outside of the pulpit, they were regular humans, which the regular human experience includes like a lot of humor, you know?
Yeah.
But that's kind of striking what you said about like how we talk to Jesus. Cause I've been thinking about like prayer as trying to build friendship with Jesus. And I don't have any friendships that have zero humor in them. Like, it's like, obviously, I mean, I would say almost nobody does. It's like very prevalent to be lighthearted and humorous and so I think actually John Mark McMillan, I saw a post where he was talking about viewing prayer as building friendship with Jesus, and that I was like, man, that resonates with me. And yeah, I find myself on autopilot not doing that, like being very like reverent, which is obviously a good like it's good that we want to be reverent of God, but there definitely is the idea that like reverence and humor are like mutually exclusive, which I think I hear you saying that's not true. Yeah,
I think there is a way to be humorous even in a reverent kind of way. There's some. It has been said before. This is going to be an approximation because I'm not going to fully ascribe to this, but there is a sense that that humor is trauma plus time. Plus time. Okay, so if you think about a traumatic event, it can and probably is inappropriate to joke about that in the moment. Right. But we've all been through something that we're going through it, and we know this is awful right now, but I'm going to laugh about this later.
True. Yeah.
I mean, it's happened to me multiple times.
Yeah.
I don't want to be here in this uncomfortable moment right now. A painful moment, uncomfortable moment. But there is a way that when I pull back and we have times, we have trauma plus time, a moment that is impacting me maybe negatively in the moment, but give it time and I can look at this in the context of the whole thing. And this is going to be something that I can laugh about.
Yeah.
Maybe not the thing, but in its place in the whole thing. Now, you think about the classical tragedy and comedy. Okay, I've preached this before, and it's not original to me, but I think the gospel is tragicomedy. It is not just tragedy. So classical tragedy comedy, literature fans out there, like, be gracious with me, okay? I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. All right, but classic tragedy and comedy is comedy. Things are going to end sort of on an up note.
Yeah.
And tragedy, things are going to end on a down note. But we learn through both of them. And if you think about the gospel as tragic comedy, it's like, oh yeah, I mean, in the middle of this story that we're living in, like, sin is rampant, brokenness is rampant. But what we are called to as Christians is actually to pull back and laugh at the whole thing. Laughing in a sense of, this hurts in the moment, but eventually we'll look back on this and we'll, like, we will be smiling because we'll see it in the context of the big picture of new heavens and new earth, everything redeemed. And we'll say, boy, that moment right there was hard, but, and then we'll tell a kind of joke about it.
That's true.
Now we are so accustomed to comedy being wrapped up with cynicism, or comedy being wrapped up with making fun of someone or hurting someone, that sometimes it's hard for us to imagine what the true purpose of comedy is, which is to see the big picture of something. So trauma plus time, see the big picture of something, not just the hurt in the moment, but the big picture of something, and recognize that this is going to end well. Comedy also, this is just true about comedy. It helps people cope in the moment. And so there are ways, like, you can look at, I've been reading a book recently that's talking about the progression of comedy after 9/11 and how the time it took, which was actually not long, for us to kind of get back to comedy. And you might remember SNL's, well, I'm sorry, I'm old. But SNL's first episode, they're filming in New York City, and Saturday Night Live's first episode, they waited like 2 weeks, and then they got back and they had the mayor on there, and they had like firefighters and policemen in the room, but they started with the joke, and they said it's time, it's kind of time to get back to laughing. And so there's a way that comedy helps us process. And that's what the gospel does. The good news, in the middle of my brokenness, I'm looking outside of the moment. So trauma plus time, which God is outside of time and space. And so I'm looking with his eyes in the moment at something that I can still say, no matter what's happening today, as much as I hurt today, I know I can laugh at this. I know there's going to be something beautiful that's going to make me look at this and say, that moment that seems so painful for me, I now, because Jesus has made all things new, I knew that it couldn't touch me. Romans 8, the end of Romans 8 is kind of like this. I mean, it's Paul saying, who's going to stop us? A sword or famine or nakedness. It's like, I mean, it's kind of a punchline. It's like, nobody's going to stop us, guys. He's looking at his current trauma, his current pain, the current persecution. He's pushing into the future, and he's looking back and laughing at it. So there is something to comedy that it's comforting in the moment. It helps us process and make it through things, and it's trauma plus time, which there's a hint, there's a sniff, there's a smell of the gospel in that. Colossians 3:1, keep your mind on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. It's like, Psalm 2, after Psalm 1. So the righteous man, blessed is he who meditates day and night on the law of the Lord. And then Psalm 2 goes into the nations rage, and the kings, God laughs at them. He sits back and laughs at them. And so there's something from God's perspective that he's looking at. And this does not negate, this is another problem we have in our finiteness. And the way that we just view comedy. This doesn't negate that God weeps, that God that God sees the need and is going to provide justice. But all of that is happening together with God. And there's a way that the nations rage, and yet God is laughing at the efforts of Genesis 11. Sorry, is like Bible's like my one thing.
No, this is good.
But
this is good.
Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel. Humans instead of receiving the name that God has for them, humans decide we're going to make a name for ourselves. And they build this big tower. And there's like, the text is funny because they're building this big tower, you know, they're making themselves so big, making a name. And the very next line is, I'm going to Trevor this a little bit. God heard a little kerfuffle going on. And so he climbed down the stairs and looked down and said, what's going on? And he sees kind of this tiny tower. It's like, it's a very humorous line that's putting in perspective. It's this, God is laughing at your efforts to make a name for yourself.
Yeah.
When he's already given a name to you. And you can even imagine like the storyline of the Bible. Like you can imagine how, like, there's a way that you can pull back and it's kind of a slapstick comedy. It's like, God gives people a name, says you're created in my image to be like me. And then the next move is, hey, we should make a name for ourselves. And I wonder if we can be like God. You know, it's like there's comedy in that.
Wow.
It's very slapstick. At the same time, it's tragic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I think that you were saying like, we equate comedy with like, you know, at somebody's expense, essentially. Like that's how we think about it. And so we're like, how could that have anything to do with God or the Bible? Like this condescension. And we like equate laughter itself with like scoffing, but it's like, that's a type of laughter,
right?
But there's a lot of different types of laughter,
right?
You know, kids laugh and it's at nobody's expense, and it's not like you can make a funny face.
Oh yeah.
And they laugh. Or sometimes kids, like, they'll start playing and they just start laughing. Like they're just like, they're playing tag and they're laughing and seemingly at nothing. But I think that's more because as we get older in our culture, we start to equate something being funny or worth laughing at as scoffing at somebody.
Right.
You know,
which is that scoffing is condemned in Scripture. Psalm 1, it talks about the scoffers. And so God separates himself from that kind of comedy at someone else's expense. But you also have Jesus. This happens in Matthew, and I don't have the chapter verse offhand, but I'm not required to because it's not inspired. But in Matthew, maybe in some other Gospels, Jesus is talking about. This is where they're accusing him of being a glutton. And like you sit with sinners. And basically Jesus says, look, I can't do anything right. Okay, this is going to be Trevor again, just setting the scene because I can't quote it directly right
paraphrase,
now. But Jesus essentially says, look, whatever I do is wrong to you guys.
Yeah.
If I laugh, you're like, that should have been a serious moment.
Yeah.
If I'm serious, you're like, and he talks about the kids. We played a dirge for you and you didn't cry. And then we played the flute for you and you didn't dance. It's like, there's a way that no matter what you do, that people are going to point at that. Like, for example, comedy in a sermon. It's like, man, you can either take this as how is God working through the personality of this preacher, just like he works the personality of every author of Scripture. Or you can take it as, oh, that's an irreverent moment.
Yeah.
And then I'll hear, you can hear it on the other side too. You're only ever serious. Like Jesus deals with this too. It's like life is more than just one note. It's more than just one tone. And I think Jesus brings that out. I think the Scripture brings that out. And I think comedy has a place everywhere all the time. Obviously, like, it's not just jokes. But thinking in terms of there has to be a place to smile, there has to be a place to laugh. In the everyday. In the everyday.
You also spoke about like trauma plus time, how that kind of works its way into comedy, and it made me think like a lot of the stand-up and the comedy that I grew up on, like in a Black household, like Black stand-up comedy, Black comedians, it's actually a lot of that and it's actually not at somebody's expense. What's actually interesting is it's like a retelling of what they went through as kids, and then what the audience experiences. We all went through that, and it's actually, when you break it down, it's kind of curious because it's like we're all laughing that we all had that experience that we hated in the moment.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of comedy about like getting whooped.
Yeah.
And the butt of the joke is the comedian,
right?
As a kid,
right.
But everybody,
there's a pun in there, the butt of the joke, and you're talking about getting whooped.
yeah.
See, it's everywhere.
Yeah, and but what you
by the way, that could be a good rap lyric too, and there's my point.
I don't know. I'd have to work on that.
Butt of the joke getting whooped. Yeah,
well,
come on.
I
You could link that up.
I actually could see that. You'd have to work on it a little bit, but that's true. But it's like I remember how. Even now, like the positive feeling that you get from that, it's not scoffing. It's like, and people will even on social media, they'll even leave the comment like, so we all had the same childhood, and it's like this communal, like, it's funny, but like, it's like you're I don't even know. It's like you're laughing.
I'll put it like this sometimes. Comedy is not necessarily, we don't think things are funny because they're jokey.
Yeah.
What we laugh at is common experience.
Yeah.
You laugh at what you recognize, at what you're familiar with. And suddenly when you hear an experience that you thought maybe was just you, all of a sudden it makes sense. Like if you actually watch a lot of stand-up is the bulk of the material is not necessarily people saying things that are just funny on its face.
Yeah.
It only brings out laughter because you're identifying with the person.
Yeah.
I mean, Jerry Seinfeld, one of the most famous comedians of the last 100 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, he made a living off of just saying, I'm going to go and notice things that everybody notices, but nobody is saying out loud.
Yeah.
And comedy has kind of been built on that, especially in the last 50 years or so. It's what can I notice that everybody notices, but nobody's talking about, which actually brings a lot of truth to the table. Mm-hmm. It's truth that is behind the scenes that nobody is recognizing, which now you have comedians as prophets, essentially. It's like, because that's what prophets do. Prophets are bringing to the table truth that everybody is kind of seeing, but nobody is expressing or recognizing. And comedians do that very, very well. By telling it a way that everybody is going, yes, that's me. Yes, I'm done. I can't believe. And then you're laughing, which is a communal experience, which is everybody essentially saying to everybody else in that room or online, in a chat room or whatever, they're saying, yeah, us too, me too, which that is one of the most powerful phrases in the universe. Me too.
Wow.
Us too. All together.
Yeah.
And then you fast forward to like, okay, well, what's God doing in the world, with the world? And like this whole thing ends up us too, us with God, God with us with each other. I mean, so there's a supernatural thing that happens when you get people identifying a truth together, like one person leading a bunch of people into truth that everybody kind of knows is there, but one person kind of brings it up and recognizes it and says, yes, which is, that's what the Bible does too. That's what Jesus did. It's like, here's a truth you all know, nobody's really recognizing it. It's under the surface, and I'm going to bring it out. There is a God. He is real. He does love you. He's always been there for you, and he's going to do something about sin, death, pain, injustice. And then, we fly to the future and look back on today. We bring the future into today. And then even the hardest things that I go through now, I can laugh about. There's a story about, I don't know which martyr it was, but there's a story about a martyr that I love, where he is, while he's been tied up and he's being roasted. So he's tied on a stake and he's being roasted.
It's insane.
And he, because of his commitment to Christ, and he calls out, he says, I'm done on this side. You can turn me over now.
Oh yeah. I've heard of this. Yeah.
And like the only way he's able to do that, he's not scoffing.
That is crazy.
The only way he's able to do that and have that humor in the moment is because his mind is in the future. Yeah. The truth has been revealed to him about who he is, who God is, what God is doing. And he, in that moment of trauma, he's time traveling. Yeah. He's going all the way to the future. And so we say comedy is trauma plus time. It's like, yes, but you have the superpower if you're in Jesus. You know the future, you know what's coming, you have a confidence in it. And so you can time travel, which means in the very moment of the trauma, in the very moment of the suffering and the pain, you can fly to the future and bring the future back in the present. And it's those kinds of people that can make jokes on the stake or in sermons. I'm not trying to compare myself with a martyr, but you can bring it to the moment.
Right.
You can bring the comedy of the future into the moment. And at the end of the day, it's a tragic comedy.
Yeah.
Which, you ever color with Crayola crayons? And the colors that they put on there, it's always the last. So if you have blue green, that means this is mostly green, right? It means that color is mostly. Okay. It's like green. It's like it's opposite. I know with rap, you put the feature person last. But with Crayola, if you have blue green, it's going to be green.
Okay.
If you have red orange, the main color is orange.
Yeah.
All right. In a tragic comedy, it's mainly comedy.
I see.
Which is like that's where we're going. Like this thing ends up. Yeah, you get the tragic part, but this is tragic comedy. It ends in comedy. Yeah. Like that's the major theme.
Yeah.
And so the major theme of a Christian's life is joy. I know God's happy to see me, and I'm going to be happy to see God. That is the major theme. That doesn't mean there's not tears.
Right.
That doesn't mean we don't see injustice and mourn for it.
Yeah.
But man, the major timber of my life has got to be joy.
Yeah. That's interesting. That made me think of like Jesus is called a man of sorrows. But joy, sorrow is not a fruit of the spirit, and joy is a fruit of the spirit. And so that's just very interesting. It's like the main idea and the almost like the more enduring reality, the more eternal reality is joy. And we experience sorrow and we experience these things. But I think that kind of, at least the way that I was raised, it was like the sorrowful, like super serious reverence with reverence that's opposed to humor. Like these are the things of God.
Yep.
Like humor is not a thing,
right,
that God deals with, and just like music really isn't, unless it's just hymns. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that, and it's like that's not.
And that's why you felt like you could never have fun around Jesus.
Yes.
Or anything that you did with church or anything that you did with Christians. You're like, I guess I can have a little fun.
Yeah.
But I know I can't fully give myself to this because, it might come unhinged and then I'd be in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know. I think we're going to be, I don't think, because like from scripture, I know, like I'm going to be in my fullest humanity when I am fully redeemed by Christ.
Yeah.
And all of the most beautiful moments where I'm connecting with someone else and smiling and feeling joy and feeling comfortable, like that's what I'm going to have with Jesus forever. And you better believe there's humor involved in that. Because, I mean, he doesn't say, in that list we get in Revelation, where in Revelation 21, where he's talking about the new heavens and new earth. And, in that list, we get no more death. We get no more mourning. We get, no more tears, Johnson & Johnson shampoo. It's like we get all of those things, but there's nothing in there about no more laughing. Or no more jokes, guys. You know why?
Wow.
Because this is an ongoing church service. You're going to get your choir robe and you can get in the choir and sing, but you can't tell jokes.
Right.
There's not going to be any sitting down and talking. It's like, this is going to be an ongoing church service.
Yeah.
And that's not there.
Right. That we're not
like what's eliminated is the really solemn and the mournful stuff. What's not eliminated is like the very human stuff, because we're going to be our most human in that moment. Yeah.
I think that something that I've experienced, and I know a lot of people, hundreds of thousands, probably millions at this point of people around the world are experiencing, is how they depict that in the show The Chosen. I feel like they're also not afraid of putting humor into that show, like the humor that we've been talking about. And I think that was a very like heartwarming, and I would even say like healing experience for a lot of people who grew up like me, to see the stories of scripture and see Jesus's ministry with an imagination of what like what is reasonable to think, like humorous things were going on, because they're all humans. So it's like, if you grew up like me, you don't think of any of Jesus's life, any of the disciples' life, any of the apostles' life, anybody in first century, any of the towns and areas. It's like everybody is like just so serious, so devout on either side. If they hate Jesus, then like that's their whole life, Like their whole, like they wake up and they're like, time to hate Jesus today, you know. And like people who are following him also wake up like, we follow Jesus, you know what I mean? And so to see, obviously it's not scripture, but it's a reasonable imagination of the conversations and the daily life, and it was like just seeing that in an artistic depiction even did something to my heart, oh, they were friends, like regular friends, like how we know friendship. They were friends in that way. There was funny stuff. You know what I mean? And it wasn't at people's expense, but like even the idea of nicknames, like there being nicknames, there being like the greater and the lesser, and there being like Didymus for twin, and like all of these things, like, and then just also, I think I appreciate the imagination of like, let's actually think about they're fishermen, like, and and I mean, it's a funny situation. It would be like if the exact same, if the story of Jesus, like if Jesus came today, like we didn't have the Bible, and he just did what he did 2,000 years ago today in Murfreesboro, a lot of funny stuff would happen.
Oh, 100%.
A lot of funny stuff. Like if he just came into like the booth and was like, shut that down and come follow me.
That's right.
That would be like, a lot of funny stuff would happen right there. You know what I mean?
I know this is, it's like people will be asking, why is Jesus in that Chili's? It's like, exactly. Like literally, I feel God in this Chili's. It's like there would just be this juxtaposition of where Jesus is in our culture, and that you're looking at a human, but you're also looking at somebody doing miracles. And some of the places that Jesus went, like was that crazy to people? It's
to
like
us, it doesn't feel that way.
How is a guy who knows this much about the scripture hanging out with those people in that place? And then just some of the stuff
anything good come from Nazareth,
some of the stuff, some of the stuff that Jesus does, and some of the parables that he tells, or even the log coming out of somebody's eye, the stuff that he does with Peter, where he says, yes, Peter makes a confession, is like, who else would return? You're the Son of God, you're the Messiah. And Jesus says, on this rock I will build my church. And then Peter says, yes, we will never let anything bad happen to you. You can't say that stuff about dying. And then he says, get behind me, Satan. So it just in that turn of a phrase is like, I'm going to build my church on you, and then also you're Satan. Like, pulling the coin out of a fish's mouth, all this stuff. He's like, hey, what are we going to do? He's like, go fishing, pull that up. All right, what do you got there?
That's funny.
Or the stuff, this stuff, and this is very rap, very dad joke of Jesus. When someone asks him, should we pay taxes to Caesar? Or not? And he says, give me that coin. And he takes the coin, and he just says, whose image on it? I mean, it's a stand-up act almost. It's like, whose image is on here? Is that, okay, then render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and what a God is God's. Now, what sometimes we forget when we're reading the text is how prevalent for those Hebrews would have been the idea of image, of the image of God. So you're created in the image of God, and Caesar's created in the image of God, which means Caesar has to render himself unto God because he's created in God's image. Just like that little slave girl is created in God's image. But it also works both ways. It's a play on words. It is wordplay for Jesus too. It's a rap bar. It's like it's a dad joke. But also, if Caesar wants this coin, he can have this coin. This is his stupid image on it. And I don't need this. Here you go. I can pull a coin out of a fish's mouth.
Right.
So here, take it. Give it to Caesar. It's like Jesus. Jesus had a comedic bite to him that sometimes gets lost, obviously in the most holy way, that sometimes gets lost on us because of the context that we put reading our Bible is a very serious experience, and it is. But we have to remember it's a tragic comedy, and like there's lots of laughter that's to come out of this, which is
was there any other time like in church history where they had like a more balanced grasp on that? Because when I think about like, you know, the church 2,000 years ago, it feels more like how I grew up, like even more so though. I'm just thinking like super serious, ornate, like
so the one thing that comes to mind, and there's probably more. One, if you want to read more on this, I think I gave him a shout out last time. He's my favorite Catholic, Peter Kreeft. Mm-hmm. He's actually has a little book called Ha on a Christian philosophy of humor. Oh, wow. It's got some good stuff in it. Okay. Martin Luther comes to mind. Mm-hmm. Martin Luther said some crazy, funny stuff. Now, he also said some wacky stuff too. But, you know, he would talk about passing gas at demons. Mm-hmm. Like, I found a demon in the corner, and I'm gonna turn my posterior that direction and take care of that thing.
Yeah.
You know, okay. It's like there's
so basically demon gun bars. We are like on Creative Control. We're co-signing demon gun bars. Put them back in Christian hip hop. Don't take them out because Martin Luther said he was farting on demons.
It is. I wasn't going to say the F word because I didn't know how much we could take it, but you said it, so that's all good. So that's one thing that comes to mind. Okay. But I am working on reading, thinking about trying to make the connection between like a sort of theology of humor. And I have a whole thing on pray and play that we can talk about next time if you want to.
Yeah. So this actually just popped in my head, and I just want your take on this. So, because you mentioned the image of God. So I put out a song recently called Imago Interlude, and it's talking about how everybody, even our enemies, have the image of God, and that deserves a certain type of dignity, and we should in some way, in a sense, see Jesus in everybody, meaning see his image in everybody, meaning they have dignity, right? And I received a good amount of like pushback and backlash to that. I had like a provocative line of like, I saw him, Jesus, on the corner begging for some drugs and food. When I originally wrote it, it was, you know, there was the thought of, should I just say food? Like, should I say drugs or not? Right? People didn't like that. But then I was like, well, no, though, that actually drives home the exact point that I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people pushed back and said that, which I was very surprised at this. Essentially, we don't all have the image of God. We have Adam and Eve had the image of God. We lost the image of God in the fall, and we become sons of Adam without the image. And then when we come to Jesus, when we're saved, then we have the image again, which I don't agree with. But I just what is your take on kind of just that whole conversation? Like,
let me start by honoring what a good instinct that I think you're we'll just take them in the best possible way. Your loving critics, fans had in that instance, and I think the good instinct is particularly with the drugs line. Assuming, you know, what we're associating with like addiction. We're associating that with, you know, obviously our, you know, pharmaceutical reps out there, like, you know, I don't know, big pharma, there may be some sin in there too. But the whole point is, I think people feel uneasy about saying, like, associating Jesus with sin or sinfulness, which we should. It's like Jesus, for sure. Like, Jesus is, and we desperately need him to be, like for our own salvation, holy, set apart from sin, like sinless, perfect.
That's right.
You know, it takes a spotless lamb to absorb the sin of humans. Like he has to be perfectly spotless. And so that's a good instinct to have. And I would never want to squelch that instinct in anybody.
Right.
To say, man, when we start talking about Jesus associated with sin, I want to be real careful.
Right.
I mean, this is all the councils of the early church. Like, this is what they argued about.
Yeah.
This is where a lot of our theology, like, had to be written down, because people were like, how human is Jesus, and how separated from humanity is Jesus?
Right.
Because it's a struggle to think about both of those things coming together. So I want to honor that in your critics.
Right.
However, that said, it is my understanding that we do not lose the image of God. The image of God is never lost from us.
Right.
It is marred. It is hidden. It is broken, but we all remain human. We all have inherent value and worth. I would affirm your lyric. I think you did the proper kind of wrestling with it, that's good. And what I think you're seeing is some of the nature of art, which is to get people to a point where they have to wrestle with something and think something through. But we don't lose the image of God. It is marred. It is covered up. But everybody retains the image of God. And we need that, because it is the image of God that remains in people, even in their sin, that continues to connect them to that. They still see beautiful things as beautiful. They still have a longing and a deep need to be completed, to be whole, to be restored. And so that image remains. The difference is we come into, like, upon salvation, is we come into the family of God. We are adopted as sons and daughters of God. We get a seat at the table. So it is coming home. But when you leave home, you still carry that last name, if you think of the image of God as a last name. But coming to Jesus is a homecoming. Now I don't just have the last name out here. I'm coming back, and now I'm home. Now I'm with Dad. Now I'm sitting at the table. Now I'm feasting at his meal together. So,
yeah, for sure. And it definitely was like a provocative, wanting people to get outside of comfort zones and think about it, because I think it's important for us to keep in our mind that everybody has that image of God, because that's going to affect how we treat them. It's going to affect our hope for them, how we interact with them, how we share love with them, how we try to even like help them through things like addiction and stuff like that. If we believe this is somebody who has the image of God, and there's so many times in history where when people have the opposite view, and they might not have the language image of God, but dehumanize is is similar thing to taking the image of God away. So the great atrocities of history are this slow,
these are not humans anymore.
Slippery slope of dehumanization until somebody's a cockroach, and now I can do anything. And I'm saying, when they have the image, when you have a high view of humanity, because of the image
or 3/5 of a man, it's like that. It is the stripping of the image of God that ends up in those kinds of dehumanizing atrocities.
Right. And so I think I want to be charitable to everybody. But I think it's dangerous to think to look at somebody who is, an upstanding citizen and be like, oh, they have the image of God, but this person I see doesn't. Right. Like, a lot of bad comes from that. So it was like I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on that. I think that it's time. Back for the first time. Trevor Atwood in the control room.
It's great, man.
You've done this before, so you know what it is. Rapid fire questions. First thing that comes to mind. Here we go. What's your favorite procrastination technique when you're avoiding a creative project?
Oh, my favorite is looking up articles about sports teams that I follow.
That's solid. That's a solid
ESPN, like I'm all over that when I want to procrastinate.
Yeah. I think I know the answer to this one, but I still want to ask it. If you could live in any sitcom world, which one would it be and why?
It's either going to be Cosby Show, Seinfeld, or The Office. That's my holy trinity of sitcoms.
Seinfeld, Cosby, and The Office. We'll have to bleep Cosby. It'll just be
I know. You can ask me about that next time. Okay, I have a theory on that. Michael Jackson, Cosby, and even Snoop Dogg in the Olympics. So remember that for next time.
Oh wow! All right. Well, next, for the 30th episode, we have to we have to remember to return to that for sure. Okay, if you could have dinner with any 3 people, living or dead, who would they be and why? So you get 3 this time.
I think I would like to have dinner with, I think it would be interesting to find, one of my ancestors. So to try to, obviously I don't know all the names there, but to try to work up the line, I think it'd be interesting to see where I came from and how far back can I go just to hear about where I came from. So I don't know that person's name, but that might be one. And I'm going to exclude Jesus from this list. I have dinner with Jesus every day, so I'm already doing that. Because I don't like excluding Jesus from anything, but for this, I will.
Yeah.
I think I would like to. Well, I'm just going to say what's on my mind. Yep. I think that's what I'm supposed to do.
Yep.
I have always had a deep respect and love for Art Monk, who was a receiver for the then Washington Redskins, and we can make an argument about that, why they should be the Commanders. This is my favorite football team, and I know I don't need to hear it from Cowboys fans. Like, I know how bad we are, and I hope there's hope. But he was the first athlete that I watched that I respected because of his humility. At his time, I mean, at one point he was the best receiver in NFL history, and you heard the least from him. Just quietly did his work behind the scene. I think that would be beautiful. A guy that I respect. And then I think I would also I would love. I'm going to cheat a little on this one. I would love to talk to either myself or my wife. As a like 13 or 14 year old, because I'm fascinated with whether the things I remember about the way that I thought when I was that age, if they're still true, if they're true.
Yeah,
I would love to get the perspective one-on-one and just ask myself a lot of questions, but also my wife, because I wasn't in her life at that time, and so I'd love to hear the way she was thinking about her life at that time.
That's
so good. I cheated a little bit, but
yeah, that's a good answer though. Okay, this is shot number 2. Your current favorite No Big Deal lyric.
All right, I don't have a specific lyric. I listened to a song like 6 times this morning, so because I knew this question was coming, but I can't pull up the exact lyrics. But from the new album, my favorite has been "Art of War."
Okay. Yeah.
And so there's a line that you start off with that's about starving artist. You're eating off.
That's what I'm just talking at the beginning. Yeah. Everybody want to eat off our plate. What happens when the artist gets tired of starving?
Yeah. I like that line, and I like the whole setup and flow of Art of War.
Yeah. Hey, Art of War. Okay. Maybe we should, get that video together. All right. And a little bit of a redemption, but what problem do you have with John Keith?
You know what? John Keith was recently at my house for dinner. And I just want to say there's a lot to love about John Keith. And I went after his neck tattoos last time. And then it made dinner awkward. And I just felt like I shouldn't have put that out on the internet. Because there's lots of people with neck tattoos that are great people, and it was just a joke, and that's probably, my humor going too far. So
yeah, but
maybe I should just apologize to John Keith right now.
I don't think so. And here's the thing. You didn't put it out on the internet. I put it out on the internet.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
That's true.
And even if you don't stand by it, I stand by it. All right, this has been Creative Control. Thank y'all. See y'all next time.